Hey guys, welcome back to Eerie with Alicia. My name is Alicia and I talk about all things true crime related. Okay, so before we get started with today's video, I just want to give a huge shout out to Jake Bush 9411 for actually commenting on my last video and recommending that we cover today's case. So thank you so much. Two teenage girls, one small English county, and a killer who thought fake blood would save him until DNA made him sweat. This is the story of Colin Pitchfork. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in Leicestershire, England in the mid 1980s, and we're gonna imagine a very sleepy little village, and it's honestly the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business. And I know most of you guys know exactly what kind of place I am talking about, because I know I do. People still walked home after pubs and parties without a second thought. Now, I have never done that and I never will do that. So you can imagine how safe people felt within this little town. That ordinary, calm vibe is what made what happened next feel impossible. On November 16th, 1983, 15-year-old Lynda Mann left a friend's house to walk across a field on her way home. She was a typical teenager, just hanging out with her friends, nothing crazy. When she did not come home, her family's worst fear started to creep in. Linda's body was found in the early hours in a little patch of the woods near the town. Now, she'd been sexually assaulted and strangled. There were physical traces such as fibers and, crucially, semen, but in 1983, the police didn't have the DNA tools that we have really come to rely on now. They collected the evidence, obviously, and started a local investigation, but the technology to fingerprint DNA wasn't ready for courtroom use just yet. The case went cold in the sense that there just wasn't enough information to charge anyone with Linda's murder. Obviously, a small town like that doesn't just move on from a ghastly murder like Linda's. People changed their routines, parents stopped letting their kids walk alone, and there was a simmering terror underneath daily life. Everyone wondered, could this have been a random creep or something much worse? 3 years later, a second girl vanished under eerily similar circumstances. And suddenly, police realized this might not have been random at all. That realization is what pulls this whole story into motion. Okay, so we're fast forwarding 3 years since Linda's murder, and that quiet fear in Leicestershire turns into full blown horror. On July 31st, 1986, 15-year-old Dawn Ashworth left a friend's house in the village of Enderbury to walk home. It's the same kind of area, same vibe, narrow lanes, fields. Everyone's sort of trusting that nothing truly awful happens here. We gotta stop doing that, y'all, because I find myself doing that so often. I am so trusting of areas because they're safe, but honestly, you just never know. That's also probably why people choose to attack these safer areas because people are so trusting. So, I don't know. I feel like we all just have to stop being trusting of safe areas. Now, when Dawn ended up disappearing out of nowhere, people immediately thought of Lynda Mann. That nightmare from 3 years ago was suddenly back in everyone's head. Dawn's body was found 2 days later in a wooded area off a footpath. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled just like Lynda. To the community, it felt like confirmation. The monster who murdered Lynda was still out there, and to the police, it meant something even more chilling. This looked like the work of the exact same offender. So, investigators compared the two crime scenes. Same general area, similar victim profile, similar injuries, and same kind of forensic evidence left behind. They already had semen samples stored from the Lynda case, and now they had even more from Dawn. Even without modern DNA, they knew enough to say, okay, this is one offender. We have a serial rapist and a killer operating on our doorstep, which is honestly so terrifying. Pretty quickly, attention shifted onto a local 17-year-old named Richard Buckland. He was a bit of an outsider, he had a few learning difficulties, and he worked near where Dawn's body was found. Police interviewed him once, then again, and again. Over time, under all that pressure, Richard obviously started to say things that sounded like a confession. Eventually, Richard confessed to killing Dawn Ashworth, but here's the twist. He repeatedly denied killing Lynda Mann. Even when pushed, he would not put himself at Lynda's crime scene. His story was inconsistent, and a lot of what he said didn't actually match up with the forensic evidence. But back then, a confession was the crown jewel for the police. They thought, we've got him. Richard was the first person in British history to confess to a murder and then later be cleared by DNA. But in the moment, nobody had that script yet. To the public, the idea that a vulnerable teen might falsely confess under pressure wasn't really part of the conversation. People wanted to believe that the danger was over, case closed, everyone can breathe again, everything's okay. Except one forensic scientist was not convinced. Thank God. The biology didn't sit right, obviously. The evidence did not line up neatly with Richard, clearly. And there was this brand new technique that might be able to prove Richard's innocence. This is where a quiet little genius named Alec Jeffries steps into the story and basically rewrites criminal justice history. I can't even imagine how Richard felt. Like, imagine you're just an outsider, like you don't really communicate with a lot of people, and then everyone was like, all right, he did it. He killed Dawn. He's the one. Like, I can't imagine how scared this poor kid was. He was only 17. Like, I don't know. I feel like the whole town's fear just being dumped onto you. Like, I don't know. I feel so bad for him. And I was just thinking about that and I had to jump in. Alec Jeffries was a genetics professor at Leicester University, quietly obsessed with DNA patterns. I was so bad at anything science related. So props to this guy. Like, it's hard. In 1984 and 85, he'd been tinkering with a technique that could show whether two samples came from the same person. Basically, the earliest form of DNA profiling. Okay, let's talk science for a second. Let's get a little nerdy. So, Jeffries discovered that certain regions of DNA vary widely between different people, like a genetic fingerprint. That meant for the first time, scientists could compare biological material from crime scenes to a suspect and get an answer that would statistically be meaningful. It doesn't sound like a big deal in this day and age, but back then it was revolutionary, and I honestly still think it is. When Jeffrey's method was first used on Lynda and Dawn's semen samples, the result was damning. The samples matched each other. That confirmed both girls had been attacked by the same man. And it also showed the samples did not match Richard Buckland. Yeah. Suddenly, the whole foundation of the Buckland confession looked pretty unstable. Now that Richard Buckland was out of the picture, finally, he didn't do it, police needed a suspect to test against the DNA, but they didn't have a name. So they launched something massive and kind of unprecedented. They asked thousands of local men to volunteer blood or mouth swabs so they could compare their DNA to the crime samples, which I honestly think is kind of smart. It was called mass screening. It was invasive and it was a little controversial back then. I don't know why, but it was one of the only ways to catch a man who otherwise left no trail. It may have been controversial or invasive back in the day, but like I think that's pretty smart. I think the police did the right thing in this scenario. Okay, guys, are you listening? Because this is where it actually gets genuinely crazy. A man named Colin Pitchfork, who worked in local bakeries and had access to female routes, actually bribed a coworker to give his blood sample under his name so he'd be able to slip through. For a while, that worked. The test did not match, and Pitchfork kept moving around freely. It was only when a lab technician noticed the swap And then a tip came in from someone who'd been offered money to take the test. That's when police circled back and tested Pitchfork's real DNA. When they finally tested Pitchfork's real DNA, it matched the semen from both crime scenes. He was arrested and charged. The sense of relief in the community was wild, obviously, but there was also this cold realization that the man had been hiding in plain sight and tried to game the system, and he literally could have gotten away with it. Pitchfork's trial opened in November of 1988. The prosecution's case leaned hard on that new DNA evidence. This was literally the first time DNA profiling had been used to convict someone of murder in the world. The first time in the world. Crazy. The defense tried to poke holes, chain of custody questions, the novelty of technique, and the usual reasonable doubt dance, but the science was sharp and the statistics were pretty brutal. In the courtroom, experts explained how Jeffrey's method actually worked. They mapped the match between the semen from both girls and Pitchfork and translated complicated scientific probabilities into language that the jury could easily understand. They'd probably have to dumb it down a little bit more for me, but I'm glad the jury understood. They presented it as a match that couldn't be explained away by chance. For the first time, jurors were being asked to weigh genetic evidence. Obviously, Pitchfork tried to deny everything, but there was also other incriminating evidence. His familiarity with the victim's routes, opportunities tied to his jobs, and the blood swap lie that showed intent to deceive the investigation. All of that piled on top of the DNA made his denials pretty hollow. In December of 1988, Pitchfork was found guilty of the murders of Lynda Mann and Ashworth. The sentence was life imprisonment, and the judge made it clear that this was a uniquely dangerous offender. For the families, the verdict was a mix of relief and, of course, devastation. Obviously, relief that the man had been caught, but devastation that the truth had taken so long and so much pain to actually reveal. Pitchfork's conviction validated DNA forensics in a way that really nothing else could. Police forces worldwide started building DNA databases and changing how they investigated sexual violence and murder. But the case also raised real ethical questions. Mass screenings felt invasive, there were fears about privacy and consent, and the Buckland wrongful confession loomed as a reminder that human error and pressure can still wreck lives. As for the families, justice didn't erase the loss. Lynda and Dawn's names became shorthand for the importance of listening to victims and investing in science that actually helps them. The community of Leicestershire was never the same. There was a long, slow process of rebuilding trust and learning to live with the knowledge that such a predator had been amongst them. Okay, so yes, the Colin Pitchfork case is a little bit dark and it is a little bit uncomfortable, but it is also proof that science can catch what people miss. But it also shows how fragile justice can be when it leans too hard on confession, assumption, or shortcuts. Once again, shout out to Jake Bush 9411 for today's case. Thank you so much. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you guys have any recommendations for a case that I should cover in my upcoming videos. Make sure to like and subscribe for more dark, nerdy, true crime content every single week. I love you guys so much. Bye-bye.